Oh, hiya, honey.
Hi! Hi! Ethel! Ethel! What's the matter? You're looking at a future doornail.
Lucille Ball was America's sweetheart, the red-haired queen of comedy who made millions laugh week after week. But when the cameras stopped rolling and the crowds faded, something changed. Behind the bright lights and Emmy-winning smiles, a quieter, more haunting reality began to take shape. Her home, once filled with laughter and love, fell into stillness. No family dinners, no surprise visits, just silence. How did the woman who broke barriers and rewrote television history end up alone in her final days? There's one early moment, unseen and deeply buried, that might hold a clue. A moment that never made it to the screen. It didn't involve fame, fortune, or fame-hungry headlines, but it left a mark that shaped everything that followed. This is not just the story of Lucille Ball's lonely ending. It's about what built her, what broke her, and why, when it mattered most, nobody came. A childhood marked by tragedy. Lucille Ball's earliest years were shaped by instability and heartbreak, long before she became a legend of laughter. Born in Jamestown, New York, Lucille was the first child of Henry and Desi Ball. Her father, a telephone lineman, moved the family often, from New York to Montana and New Jersey, always chasing work. But in 1915, tragedy struck. When Lucille was just 3 years old, her father died from typhoid fever. Her mother was pregnant with Lucille's baby brother, and emotionally shattered by the sudden loss. Unable to cope, she made the heartbreaking decision to send Lucille to live with her step-grandparents while her infant son was taken in by another set of relatives. The death of her father left a permanent mark on Lucille. Though she was very young, she later recalled vivid and haunting details from that day, like a picture falling off the wall and birds tapping at the kitchen window. These images stayed with her and fed a lifelong phobia of birds, especially those depicted in artwork or decorations. But more than that, it was the emotional fracture of losing a parent that carved a sense of detachment and abandonment into her core. The sense of home and family stability was gone, replaced by the cold reality of separation and survival. Even as a child, Lucille learned how to defy the weight of sorrow. She was quite entertaining and used theater as an outlet for her emotions. The family stories tell of her constructing shows behind a curtain hung in the living room, where she would sing, act, and imitate adults for anyone willing to watch. These impromptu productions were not just innocent childhood fun. They were Lucille's earliest acts of defiance. In a world that had already taken so much from her, comedy became her medium for connection and a means to reclaim attention and affection. The anguish of early loss served as fuel for Lucille's iron determination. Her desire to succeed, to earn enough money to pull her family together again, was a desire born not solely out of ambition, but out of emotional necessity. She came from a life of hard times and no safety net. What she possessed was a glimmer of talent and a need to convert her wrenching past into meaningful work. Her childhood was not just a passing phase. It was the furnace that forged her strength, wit, and indomitable spirit. But just when the dust seemed to settle, life delivered its cruelest blow yet. The backyard shooting. When Lucille Ball was around 16 years old, another shattering experience struck, one that not only upended her family's life, but also cemented her complex view of the world. Her stepfather had set up a backyard shooting range for safe target practice, a common activity in rural areas at the time. Lucille's younger brother, Fred, who was about to turn 12, had been given a .22 caliber rifle by their grandfather as a birthday gift. One afternoon, while the children were practicing under supervision, an 8-year-old neighborhood boy wandered into the range, completely unaware of the danger. At the worst possible moment, a shot rang out. The boy was struck in the spine and left permanently paralyzed. The emotional and legal consequences were swift and severe. The injured boy's family sued, and Lucille's family was found liable. They lost their home, furniture, and any savings they had. Their insurance was voided in the aftermath. Financial ruin was only part of the collapse. The community turned cold. The once tight-knit town cast them out, and the Balls were forced to relocate, leaving behind their home under the weight of disgrace. Her grandfather, who had gifted the rifle, was destroyed by guilt and never recovered emotionally or professionally. It was the second time Lucille's sense of family and security had been completely stripped away. From the moment the world saw Lucille Ball as a champion of laughter and joy, few understood that behind her impeccable comedic timing lay a childhood rife with tragedy and misery. This tragedy robbed the family of a fortune and planted in Lucille a deep sense of mistrust and isolation. It was something she never spoke of, and the silence spoke volumes. In Lucille's mind, this was not an experience for which sympathy could be asked. It was an inconsolable wound that became a defining moment of her life, proving that nothing stays the same for long. Such trauma became a haunting metaphor that ran in Lucille's early life. Calmness seemingly turning into chaos. This was not mere bad luck. It was emotional earthquakes that shaped how Lucille viewed herself and the world. Lucille learned to endure, adapt, and keep moving forward with dreams out of reach and families in disarray. She did not become stronger, but more intelligent. Behind the jokes of the comic legend stood a woman hardened by suffering, who carried the invisible weight of early tragedy into every one of her gags, every one of her roles, and every decision that would later become part of her legacy. From rejection to resilience. Lucille Ball's journey into show business was anything but smooth. At 15, she was infatuated with a local troublemaker named Johnny DeVita, an older man her mother strongly disapproved of. Determined to steer Lucille away from what she believed was a destructive path, her mother scraped together enough money to send her to the prestigious John Murray Anderson School for the Dramatic Arts in New York City. It was a bold move, but instead of finding encouragement, Lucille faced harsh rejection. She was placed in the same class as Bette Davis, who quickly became a standout, while Lucille struggled to find her footing. The instructors were brutally honest, telling her outright that she lacked talent. In fact, the story goes that they even refunded her tuition, implying she wasn't worth the investment. Despite that crushing experience, Lucille refused to give up. She later admitted that her time at drama school only taught her one thing: how to be afraid. But fear didn't stop her. It fueled her. She returned to New York in 1928, determined to prove her critics wrong. Not long after, she was sidelined again, this time by a severe case of rheumatic fever. For nearly 2 years, she was bedridden, watching the prime years of her budding career slip away. It would have been understandable for her to walk away from the entertainment world altogether, but Lucille came back with even more focus and drive. Her first major break was not so much acting as modeling. Lucille got a job with fashion designer Hattie Carnegie, who helped alter her public image. Under Carnegie's tutelage, Lucille dyed her naturally brown hair blonde, began to wear chic clothes, and learned to walk and talk with elegance and sophistication. It was the kind of training that, in its own way, was even more important than acting school. By modeling, she developed an easy confidence and a keen sense of what holds an audience's attention without saying anything, the very skills needed for her future development in comedy and television. In consideration of the years 1930 and 1940, Lucille found every way possible to enter Hollywood and took any film part she could get. She was often cast in slapstick comedies for bit parts in under-the-shade B-movies. She labored on over 75 films, but never graduated to A-list status. She was labeled by the studios as Queen of the B's, a name she publicly laughed at, but one she privately admitted hurt. Nevertheless, she refused to let it define her. Every role, however small, was an opportunity for Lucille to learn. She learned about the mechanics of film production, honed her comedic timing, and slowly began to accrue the skills that later made her a pioneer on television. Her endurance in the face of early rejection became the bedrock of the name she would one day embody. The Lucille and Desi saga. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz's relationship was a whirlwind romance that defied the odds from the start. They met in 1940 on the set of the film Too Many Girls, where sparks flew almost immediately. Desi, a Cuban band leader full of charm and swagger, asked Lucille if she knew how to rumba, offering to teach her if she'd go out with him that night. The chemistry was instant and intense, leading to a surprise elopement in Connecticut just 6 months later. Their marriage shocked both Hollywood and the public, not just because of the speed, but because interracial couples were rare, controversial in the 1940s. Despite the skepticism, Lucille threw herself into the relationship, describing Desi as wild, unpredictable, and utterly captivating. However, their passionate love story was also filled with turmoil. Desi's constant touring with his band and Lucille's early mornings on set meant the couple spent more time apart than together. Deep-seated cultural differences also added strain. Desi had grown up in a household where infidelity wasn't seen as a moral failing, and his drinking and womanizing quickly became recurring issues. By 1944, just 4 years into their marriage, Lucille filed for divorce after frequent fights and emotional exhaustion. Though she withdrew the petition after a brief reconciliation, their relationship would continue on a roller coaster of breakups and reunions. In order to stop the bleeding from their marriage wounds, Lucille and Desi took the plunge of working together professionally. The CBS was going to make a television adaptation of Lucille's successful radio show, My Favorite Husband, act as if she were playing her husband on screen. The network executives balked and said that an American audience cannot accept a Cuban man in that role. To prove them otherwise, Lucille and Desi created a live act in vaudeville style and toured the country. The undeniable on-screen chemistry did the trick for audiences and CBS executives, which led to the production of I Love Lucy. This bet saved their marriage for a while, but transformed television forever. It brought forth the innovation of 3-camera technique, filming, and Desilu productions, which changed the face of TV at the same time. Despite the professional successes, the cracks in the personal life deepened even further. Their daughter, Lucy Arnaz, has spoken about a childhood that was mostly filled with yelling and tension. Desi's problems with alcohol and infidelity just never stopped. In 1960, after about 20 years of ups and downs, Lucille and Desi finally divorced. She bought out Desi from Desilu for $2.5 million and became the first woman to run a major Hollywood studio. But even after the divorce, their bond never fully disappeared. When Desi was dying of cancer in 1986, Lucille frequently visited him. One last call on what would have been their 46th anniversary was made by her. With his strength fading, he whispered, "I love you too, honey." It was decisive and poignant in such an hour, having built the greatest love story that is marked both by brilliance and heartbreak. Changing television forever with I Love Lucy. When Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz pitched I Love Lucy to CBS, they weren't just trying to land a TV deal. They were fighting to reshape public perception and redefine the television landscape. Lucille was adamant that Desi, her real-life Cuban husband, would play her on-screen spouse, despite network objections. At the time, the idea of an interracial couple leading a primetime show was considered a massive risk. CBS doubted that American audiences would accept a Cuban man opposite an all-American woman. To prove them wrong, Lucille and Desi took their act on the road with a live comedy tour. The response was electric. Crowds loved their chemistry, and the success of the tour convinced CBS to greenlight the show. Creating I Love Lucy came with major production challenges, especially since Lucille refused to move to New York, where most shows were filmed. Instead, she and Desi opted to film in Hollywood, pioneering a then-unheard-of approach, shooting in front of a live studio audience using a 3-camera setup. This new format, developed with producer Jess Oppenheimer and cinematographer Carl Freund, allowed for more dynamic editing, natural audience reactions, and higher production quality. Even more revolutionary was their insistence on filming on 35mm film instead of the lower-quality kinescope used by most television productions. This decision would later enable reruns, something virtually unheard of at the time, and help create the billion-dollar syndication model that still defines the industry. In an unprecedented move, Lucille and Desi opted for a pay cut and gave way to the full ownership of episodes of the show through their production company, Desi Productions. This proved to be an investment not only for complete creative control, but also for long-term financial returns. The investment was fruitful. Immediately, I Love Lucy gained ground. Another first was achieved in 1952, when a real-life incident regarding Lucille was incorporated into the show, showing of a pregnant woman to the television audience. CBS wouldn't let the word pregnant be used, so the writers cleverly used euphemisms such as expecting, and even the French phrase enceinte. The episode where Lucy gave birth aired on the same day, January 19, 1953, when Lucille delivered her actual son, Desi Jr. It surpassed the viewership of more than 44 million people, more than those who watched President Eisenhower's inauguration the next day. That legacy of I Love Lucy is more than just record-breaking ratings. It ran from 1951 to 1957, topping the Nielsen charts for 4 of its 6 seasons. Its replays, even after cancellation, introduced new generations to Lucille Ball. With 5 Emmy Awards to its name, it will always remain as one of the most influential series in television history. Apart from giving endless laughter to millions, I Love Lucy broke down borders, racial, cultural, and even technical, and set new standards as to how television was made and who could lead it. Actually, Lucille Ball didn't just star in a hit sitcom, but she and Desi completely redefined the medium because they showed the world that creativity, persistence, and bold decisions could change entertainment forever. While millions were laughing at home, whispers behind the scenes threatened to silence her. Facing the Red Scare. In September 1953, at the height of I Love Lucy's success, Lucille Ball's career faced a potentially career-ending scandal. Gossip columnist Walter Winchell hinted on national radio that a famous red-headed television star had ties to communism. Though he didn't name her, the implication was clear. The next morning, reporters swarmed Lucille and Desi Arnaz's home. The Los Angeles Herald-Express ran a front-page headline in red ink that read, "Lucille Ball named Red." In the middle of the McCarthy era, being accused of communist sympathies could ruin lives and careers, especially for someone in the public eye with millions of viewers and corporate sponsors behind her. The root of the controversy traced back to 1936, when Lucille had registered to vote as a member of the Communist Party. However, she later explained to government investigators that it wasn't a political decision, but a gesture meant to appease her grandfather, Fred Hunt, who had raised her and was a staunch supporter of workers' rights. Lucille never attended any party meetings, and her name only surfaced again due to an alleged gathering at her home, which she insisted she hadn't known about. Her brother supported her account, emphasizing it was more about family harmony than any ideological commitment. It was a dramatic event. Desi Arnaz wasted no time acting to clear his wife's name. He invited the press into their home and laid clear all the facts. Then, during the live taping of a new season's episode, he took the extraordinary step of addressing the audience directly. He called reporters in, held up a phone to the microphone, and played a statement from J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI director, repeating that Lucille Ball was not and had never been a communist. The hall erupted in applause. Desi then added, "Now I want you to meet my favorite redhead. The only thing red about her is her hair, and even that's not legitimate." And everyone laughed, momentarily losing the weight of the moment. The scandal had the making of focusing a halting light on Lucille's acting career. But thanks and transparency, backed by Desi's defiance, made a celebrity out of her. Just a few days later, she was proclaimed Woman of the Year and invited to the White House. In an age where the faintest suggestion could prove fatal for many careers, Lucille Ball weathered one of the most dangerous political storms in entertainment history in America. It was a tribute, not only to her integrity, but to the strength of her partnership with Desi and the affection that the American public had for her. Her groundbreaking role. After her divorce from Desi Arnaz in 1960, Lucille Ball made a bold and historic move by buying out his shares in their company, Desi Productions, for $2.5 million. This made her the first woman to run a major television studio in Hollywood, a groundbreaking achievement at a time when few women held executive positions in entertainment. Many industry insiders doubted her ability to lead. After all, she was known as a comedian and actress, not a business executive. But Lucille quickly proved them wrong, taking on the dual role of creative visionary and corporate decision-maker. Lucille didn't just maintain Desilu's success, she expanded it. While still starring in The Lucy Show, she was simultaneously making high-level decisions about programming, budgets, and syndication strategy. Her instincts for what would resonate with audiences were unmatched. She understood the growing importance of reruns, and even launched a syndication division within Desilu to manage them, years ahead of her competitors. Under her leadership, Desilu continued to thrive, becoming the largest independent television studio in the U.S. by the mid-1960s. Maybe the most daring move of Lucille Ball was made in 1966, when she had the strength to give the green light to two very ambitious and risky brand-new series, Star Trek and Mission Impossible. Her staff felt both were too unorthodox and extravagant for Lucille. Lucille, however, did believe in the idea and trusted her instincts. She, at one time, thought the show was about celebrity tours in space. But no matter how confused, she stayed firm. After all, the gamble paid off. The shows went on to become cultural phenomena and cornerstones of television history. Today, they are classic franchises that spawned decades of sequels, movies, and spin-offs. In 1967, having transformed the studio and constructed a media empire, Lucille sold Desilu for $17 million, pocketing phenomenal profits and a permanent legacy. Lucille was not only successful in terms of financial stature, she made history. She broke down walls, proved a woman could thrive in the highest echelons of media leadership, and helped mold television as we know it today. Family drama that shattered Lucille's legacy. Lucille Ball was fiercely protective of her family and her carefully cultivated public image. But in the 1970s, that image was tested by a personal scandal involving her son, Desi Arnaz Jr. In 1970, the teenage Desi Jr. began dating actress Patty Duke, who was 6 years his senior, and already navigating her own mental health struggles. Lucille was outraged by the relationship. Despite having been in a similar age gap romance herself with Desi Sr., she was adamantly opposed to her son's involvement with Duke. Lucille issued strict ultimatums, threatening to cut Desi Jr. off financially and emotionally if he didn't end the relationship. Her reaction was seen by many as controlling, and it created significant tension within the family. Desi Jr. believed his mother's anger stemmed from her desire to protect the family brand from potential scandal. Patty Duke later said she didn't hold a grudge against Lucille, but admitted that she was deeply hurt by the treatment she received, especially since she felt her intentions with Desi Jr. were genuine. The situation became even more complicated when Duke married a man named Michael Tell in 1970. The marriage lasted only 13 days, but shortly afterward, Duke announced she was pregnant, sparking rumors that Desi Jr. was the real father. Lucille Ball had certainly been horrified. After spending many years building a reputation for being good and family-oriented, here comes a storm screaming about her own son. The press had a field day with this issue, and Lucille, wanting to steer clear of added scandal, kept her distance. Lucille did not go to the hospital when Duke gave birth to her son, Sean, in 1971. Desi Jr. and his sister Lucy made a few visits, but Lucille never came. In later interviews, Patty Duke admitted she allowed him to believe that Desi Jr. was the father, though she knew this was not true. DNA strongly implied that Michael Tell was Sean's biological father. Some years later, Lucille's image had sustained irreversible damage. The scandal eventually receded into history, but it left an indelible mark on how Lucille related to her children and the public. It showed yet another side of Lucille, the comedy icon, with shadows of fear, control, and a great need to sustain a perfect image. Desi Jr. remained friends with Sean Astin and maintained a bond in defiance of the headlines. For Lucille, the episode was a bitter reminder that it is possible to destroy a hard-built reputation by forces outside the control of the main character. The fallout showed just how deeply tied Lucille's identity was to not only her profession, but the ideal family she'd tried so desperately to protect. The struggles of staying relevant. After dominating television for nearly 2 decades with I Love Lucy, The Lucy Show, and Here's Lucy, Lucille Ball faced the inevitable challenge of staying relevant in an entertainment world that was rapidly evolving. By the early 1970s, audiences were changing, and so were their tastes. Although Here's Lucy attempted to speak to a younger generation, addressing civil rights, rock music, and social shifts, its appeal began to fade. Ratings started to decline in 1973, and Lucy Arnaz, Lucille's daughter and co-star, left the show to pursue Broadway. Without her, and with shifting viewer interests, Here's Lucy ended in 1974 after 6 seasons. Lucille had long been seen as television royalty, but her later career was met with growing resistance from critics and younger audiences. In 1985, she made a dramatic attempt to reinvent herself with the CBS TV movie Stone Pillow, playing a homeless woman, a stark contrast from her comedic roots. The project was risky, but it paid off in ratings and proved that Lucille could still draw a crowd when given the right material. Encouraged by the response, she attempted a full return to sitcoms in 1986 with Life with Lucy. However, times had changed. The format felt outdated, and despite her name recognition, audiences didn't connect with the show. After just 8 episodes, Life with Lucy was canceled, the first instance of one of her shows being pulled mid-season in Lucille Ball's long career. It was crushing for someone who had virtually held loaded arms in half of America's living rooms. The show had not only ended, but with it, an era, too. Lucille was devastated and began to withdraw from public engagements, the grand dame of television production behind the scenes and in front of the camera. Her last public appearance was at the 1989 Academy Awards with Bob Hope. The applause in her honor felt sweet and sour. It was a true testimony to her legacy, yet somehow indicated that it was fading into the dusk. One final joke, though his later days somehow reminded one stark fact, that the entertainment industry could be ruthless, especially to legends. Lucille never stopped reinventing herself and proving that she could still make people laugh, that she still mattered. In all those endeavors she pursued, incidentally, even her failures bore witness to unwavering resolve, just as from the very beginning. She once owned the airwaves, so why, in the end, did no one come? Loneliness in the spotlight. In the final years of her life, Lucille Ball, once the most beloved woman on television, found herself surrounded less by friends and family and more by silence. Despite decades of success, accolades, and public adoration, her later years were marked by profound loneliness. Her grand Beverly Hills mansion, once a hub of Hollywood energy, sat mostly empty, with only hired help for company. Her children had grown and were largely absent, and many of her closest Hollywood friends had either passed away or drifted from her life. It was a stark contrast to the woman who had once brought 44 million viewers together every week with I Love Lucy. One of the few bright spots during this period came in 1986, when her former husband and co-star, Desi Arnaz, was dying of cancer. Though they had divorced decades earlier, their emotional bond had never fully faded. Lucille visited him often in his final days. On what would have been their 46th wedding anniversary, she called Desi and told him she loved him repeatedly. Barely able to speak, he responded, "I love you too, honey," and added with a whisper, "Good luck with your show." 2 days later, he passed away with Lucille by his side, a rare, tender moment of reconnection and love amidst years of emotional isolation. Lucille made her swan song public appearance at the 1989 Academy Awards as she stood next to Bob Hope in the midst of applause. This sad goodbye was from an industry that owed her so much, almost immediately after being witnessed by the rest of the world. A month later, she went to the hospital with chest pains. Doctors examined her and found out that she had a tear in her aorta, a life-threatening defect. They performed emergency surgery, which she seemed, at the time, to be recovering from. But around the world, fans were sending cards and messages of support to her in the hospital. 8 days after that, on April 26, 1989, Lucille Ball died due to a sudden rupture of her aorta. She was 77 years old. Her death ushered in the close of an era. Though she spent the last years of her life in relative isolation, the impact of her life's work continued to reverberate across generations. Lucille Ball had transformed comedy, changed the landscape of television production, and pioneered as a woman in power with an emotional cost of personal tragedy, public scrutiny, and family strife. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, don't forget to like the video. Drop a comment with your thoughts or memories of Lucille Ball, and subscribe for more untold stories from Hollywood's golden age. Want more? Click the next video on your screen to dive deeper into the life of another legend. See you there.